Happy Friday and welcome to another episode of Brain Scratch. I'm John Lorden. Thank you for joining me here today. 2 weeks ago, on the last episode of Brain Scratch, we talked about the risks of people in social media and the general public lumping cases together. And today, we're going to ask what happens when law enforcement does the same. Now, the counter argument to all that is it sometimes helps cases that maybe wouldn't get any attention get attention. But in today's case, I don't know if that's exactly how the family wanted this to happen. This is a case that started as a missing person. Unfortunately, we now know that they are deceased. This is the story of Armani Dante Morgan. Let's go ahead and get into some details here. We do have a picture of Armani as well as another one sent to me by his aunt. His aunt will be joining us later. She has really been vocal trying to get awareness raised to this case, but also trying to clear up some misconceptions that happened in the media around this case. Where did this take place? It's Oak Cliff. Oak Cliff is an area of Dallas, Texas that was formerly a separate town in Dallas County. Oak Cliff has retained a distinct neighborhood identity as one of Dallas's older established neighborhoods. If we take a look at it here, apparently the boundaries of Oak Cliff are somewhat debated, but it is generally in the south section of Dallas. I think it kind of leans over 35E a little more than we're seeing in this depiction here. Let's roll back the clock a little bit. This is the Charlie Project page, which you can't access anymore. I had to get this from Web Archive, but let's just get some of the details here. Missing since June 3rd, 2017, at the age of 27, Armani stood at 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighed around 136 pounds. Morgan was last seen in Dallas, Texas on June 3rd, 2017. He disappeared after an argument with an acquaintance and has never been heard from again. Few details are available in his case, and that's part of the reason why we want to bring his aunt on today to help us understand all this more. And if you're looking at some of these photos and thinking they look quite a bit different from the family photos that we were sent, yes, some of them are indeed mug shots. I took a quick look through his criminal history, and it's really kind of petty crimes, small crimes, amounts way under $500. And that's about it. And I was kind of curious because when I see that pattern, I typically see it coupled up with drug charges. I don't recall seeing any drug charges in this case. However, his family is fairly open and honest about the fact that Armani was struggling with some type of addiction. I don't know exactly what kind. And honestly, maybe even saying addiction is overphrasing it. We'll ask his aunt for the details on that and see if we can get a better understanding of it. In terms of paperwork, she did send me a report about the discovery of the remains. Now, they were skeletonized when they were found, and there wasn't a whole lot of detail. This is an incident report. This is only page 2, but I looked through page 1 and page 2. It is one of the lightest reports that I've ever seen in my life. There is practically no information. Of course, they didn't know who the victim was, so these are all going to be filled in as unknown. All that we get is really down in the narrative down here. On July 24th, 2017, at about 1:58 p.m., ROs received a call from police dispatch regarding an unknown person finding what he believed to be human remains. And that's it. Now, there is a bunch of redacted information down here, but you can see the rest of this form wide open, and there's just not a lot of detail. For the questions of under the influence of alcohol, under the influence of drugs, of course, unknown, because we're talking skeletonized remains and not a whole lot more information around that. Armani's aunt did make it to Advocacy Con, and they put a page up specifically for him at their website. Armani Dante Morgan, a 27-year-old man from Dallas, Texas, disappeared on June 3rd, 2017. His skeletal remains were discovered on July 24th, 2017, in a vacant field near his home. Before his disappearance, Armani had been subjected to multiple violent incidents, including a shooting into his mother's apartment on May 31st, 2017, and physical assaults by known individuals. Despite these circumstances, his case remains unsolved, and his family continues to seek justice and answers regarding his death. And that is one of the conditions of this case that I'm not sure if the family believes that those violent incidents are directly connected to his death. And I'm looking forward to exploring that with his aunt to get a better understanding of that. You would think if you've got some people that have been after you, they've been roughing you up, they've been beating you up, and then all of a sudden, a bullet comes through your apartment. That seems like a pretty clear sign that at a minimum, if this person winds up deceased, that investigation should look in that direction and check these people out. Has that really happened here? I don't know. We're going to be finding out together as we crack into this. But because of the press around this case, his family also has another strong message. Let's get to that. Here at NBC5, Dallas County Medical Examiner identifies body found in July 2017 as transgender woman. And I just want to make it very clear here. His family says he was gay. His family says he did on occasion dress as a woman, but he was not transgender. And he did not, I don't believe he identified with female pronouns. Once again, we'll get the clarifying statements directly from his aunt about that. But it seems like this is kind of an unfortunate side effect. And unfortunately, these headlines would go running wild. Why? Because police kind of did this grouping. And the way they presented it, it almost kind of raised the alert through the public that maybe there was someone that was stalking transgender women in particular. Dallas police included the death in a press conference about violence against transgender women. The woman was identified as Armani Dante Morgan, the Dallas County Medical Examiner confirmed to NBC5. And look, this is what's tough about this, because we're definitely in an era where pronouns are super important to people. And in this case, we kind of have the flip happening because of a statement like this that is basically coming from law enforcement and the way that this information was presented. I've seen write-ups on this case that are using female pronouns completely in terms of speaking about Armani. Morgan's was one of 4 incidents that resulted in the death or assault of transgender women mentioned at the news conference. Dallas police said they did not have a direct link between the incidents, but they wanted the public to be aware of the similarities of each death. Now, I know some of you are watching this thinking, hey, look, John, that seems kind of clear that they're not finding a direct link between these cases. And I agree with that. However, presenting these cases in that way, even with that caveat, like, we know how social media works nowadays. And like I said, maybe there is some potential upside in Armani's case getting some level of exposure, but is there really any upside if the details of that case aren't being relayed? That's why this grouping cases thing never works in my mind. Every case needs to be looked at individually. Don't try to figure out, oh, is this a serial killer? Solve those cases, and that'll lead you back to that person. And if that person committed other offenses, you'll probably find them. And that's kind of what happens in this case as well, but not after a whole run of articles. Dallas police investigate another transgender woman's death after string of murders. Dallas police arrest suspect in the death of transgender woman and 2 others. So one of these victims, absolutely confirmed, is transgender. Dallas police have arrested a man in the fatal shooting of 23-year-old Malaysia Booker. 34-year-old Kendrell LeVar Lyles has been charged in Booker's May 18th killing and the slayings of 2 other people that month. That is very, very clear. During a press conference, Assistant Chief Moore indicated that Lyles is considered a person of interest in the murder of Chanel Lindsay, a black trans woman whose body was found in White Rock Lake, and possibly connected to the death of Armani Dante Morgan, a black trans woman whose July 2017 death was initially thought to be an act of self-harm, but was then ruled unexplained. Her family has insisted that it was murder. Now, what happened around this? That guy got charged, that guy got tried, and he got sentenced to 48 years for murdering 1 transgender woman. 2 other people were killed in a 7-day span, but neither of them was transgender. And one of the other cases that was brought up, Chanel Lindsay, they did find the murderer in that case, not this guy, completely unrelated. So that grouping for these cases did not prove to be true. And unfortunately for that grouping, we had a bunch of them get solved, but not the one that we're talking about today. And because of that, we have this woman that's going to join us right now. Let's go ahead and bring on Robin Johnson. A big thank you to Robin Johnson for joining us here today. And Robin, I wish it was under much different circumstances, but I know that you've been facing some incredible challenges with all this. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. And also, I want to thank you, John, for this opportunity because this opportunity is very rare, and I've been trying to get it on larger stages, but it's people like you that's given me and my family this opportunity. And it's been 8 years. June the 3rd, 2025, marked 8 years that Armani suddenly disappeared after having suffered multiple violent assaults against him. And the assaults were at the hands of people that knew him and knew him very well. And he knew these individuals very well. And unfortunately, uh, my journey is still ongoing. But June 3rd, 2025 marked 8 years that I've been on this journey, seeking
Mm-hmm.
answers, trying to get justice for our money.
Yeah, yeah. That's and what do you think is the big stopgap for you in terms of finding those answers?
The big stopgap is testing his case evidence. His case evidence is going to get to the root because it's going to bring forward the biological DNA of these suspects. And I've been after DPD for the past 8 years now, asking them to please allocate the funds for forensic testing in order to bring this evidence to light, which will also change our money's current cause and manner of death from undetermined to homicide. Because the focus from DPD, from what they tell me, Armani's case is not a homicide. Okay, but his case has been investigated as a homicide from the outset.
Oh, I'd say so. I mean, they came out in 2019 and they attached it to other known homicides. So it's kind of strange.
Exactly.
Okay, okay. We're going to get through all these details, but we're going to have to rewind the story a bit. Before we do that, I just want to get this super, super clear so that everyone understands. The headlines were splashed everywhere saying Armani identified as transgender. Is that accurate?
No, sir, that is not accurate. Armani did not identify as transgender. Armani identified as a gay black male. He often wore women's clothing, from time to time, but Armani did not identify as transgender. That's been the misrepresentation of him by law enforcement and by other journalists that wanted to sensationalize their stories for clicks and views. But
Yeah.
Armani did not identify as transgender, no, sir.
Okay. And so no female pronouns used for Armani. Armani was a he, him, right?
No female pronouns. It was a he, him.
Okay. Okay. I know it's been a challenging time for some of us that are a little older to kind of follow with some of these changes. So I did want to find a resource that we could look at and try to understand this a little better. And here at GLAD's website, they do have a media reference guide, which is now in its 11th edition. Obviously, they have to update this pretty regularly here. But I
Mhm.
do just want to point out the distinction that they're talking about here. Transgender is an adjective to describe people whose gender identity differs from the sex that they were assigned at birth. It's important to note that being transgender is not dependent upon physical appearance or medical procedures. A person can call themselves transgender the moment they realize their gender identity is different than the sex that they were assigned at birth. Now, knowing that Armani did occasionally wear women's clothes, there's kind of a term that honestly we don't hear it a whole lot anymore. We used to say cross-dresser, and unfortunately, there was an offensive word that was used before that. But here in this definition, this seems to be the fit. While anyone may wear clothes associated with a different sex, the term cross-dresser is typically used to refer to men who occasionally wear clothes, makeup, and accessories culturally associated with women, but who do not wish to transition and present as a woman at all times. This activity is not drag, it's a form of gender expression and not done for entertainment purposes. Be aware of the differences between cross-dressers, drag queens, and transgender women. Transgender women are not cross dressers. So it goes that direction too, just to make that super clear there.
Exactly. Exactly. And I agree with that definition.
Yeah, yeah,
I
absolutely.
totally agree with it.
It's just so weird because, we frequently hear about, even in one of those cases that Armani's got lumped in with, through the court trial, the transgender woman got dead named, basically her born name, and they were referring to her as a he in the trial. And thankfully, the lawyer caught some flack for that. We usually hear about the misidentification going in that direction, but not necessarily this one. So I just really wanted to use this moment to highlight that for everyone that's watching. It can go both ways, literally, with this type of misidentification, misrepresentation here.
That's true. That is so true.
Yeah.
And in Armani's case, DPD wanted to lump Armani's death in with the transgender assaults and murders at the time to easily sweep it under the rug. So it would be something that they wouldn't have to deal with.
So we had law enforcement present this information and kind of lump it in with these other cases. And then we had these news agencies that kind of ran with these headlines. Do you really think that, I understand that they're doing it for clicks and views, but do you think there might have been any upside in terms of it at least getting Armani's face out there, at least with a phone number that if anyone saw it and they had information, maybe they could call? Do you feel like there was any upside, even if it was, the story wasn't being represented exactly right?
No, John, I don't believe there is an upside because Armani's face, which they used his mugshot from a time
Yeah.
where he had been previously arrested. There's no upside to it because they didn't focus on him solely. They included him when they wanted to talk about the other murders or other assaults, or other criminal offenses against someone else, and
Yeah.
not focus solely on him. Had it been focused solely on him, then I could say yes. But the fact that that's not the case, no, sir.
Yeah. And to be
No,
clear, you don't believe that Kendrell Lyles has anything to do with Armani's case.
no, sir. I do not. I do not believe Kendra Lyles had anything to do with what happened to Armani.
And you're not hearing from law enforcement that they think he's in consideration still. Because at one point they did basically say, we think that maybe he's related to this case. Are they over that now? Are they not talking like that anymore?
They haven't said it to me.
Okay.
And because, and the reason being, the three individuals who we knew to have violently assaulted Armani in the days and the weeks and the months leading up to his sudden disappearance doesn't have anything to do with this Lyles person, not
Okay.
at all.
Yeah.
So that's why we as a family don't feel that this person had anything to do with it.
Okay. As I was looking into this case, I never got a really good sense of who Armani was as a person. I understand he's kind of the first boy in a family full of girls, right?
That is correct. Armani is the first grandson, in the family. His mother's son and only child. And unfortunately, John, Armani's biological dad was never a part of Armani's life at all. My father, prior to his passing in 1999, was the only father figure that Armani knew.
Mm.
And my dad, protected him and took care of him, basically, because he was the first male. Because my dad had a lot of girls, and two boys. And so when Armani was born, that made my father happy, because he could finally get some additional testosterone in the house because it was just a house full of women, and we Armani was very protected because he was so tiny when he was born,
Mm.
just a little fella. And my youngest daughter, who actually reported Armani missing, she's a year older. And she and Armani, they have a bond more sister brother bond as opposed to first cousins. And
Mm.
she always wanted to protect him and did protect him because anything that was going on with him, he made sure that she knew about it. And his mom would often tell me, he would always tell your daughter things that he wouldn't tell me, you know.
Mm.
And I told her, I said, well, it's good that he did have a confidant, somebody that he knew that would be there when he called. And it's just unfortunate that the day he went missing, she was at work and he had called her and wanted her to come to his rescue wherever he was. But she was a protector of her money. Everybody in the family was a protector of him. Just because like I say, he was tiny at first. But one thing about him, even though he was tiny, he got to the point to where he was strong enough to protect himself.
Yeah.
It would take a lot, for somebody to be able to take advantage of him, because he
What
was a scrapper.
what kind of little boy was he? What was he into? What kind of things did he like to do?
uh, a lot of rough housing, a
Oof.
lot of rough housing, and he loved to dance, even from a young age. Armani loved to dance, and I say all the time, he's always been, even from a young age, he would walk into a room if somebody was sad or was having a bad day. Before he would leave the room, everybody was smiling. He just didn't like being in an atmosphere where everybody wasn't happy. And he learned that from our mother, from his grandmother, my mother, because she always wanted peace, amongst the family in any environment that she was in, and our money adopted that same value. No matter where he went, he was always the light in the room. When he entered the room, you know it because he's dancing, singing, smiling, you know. And by him being a latchkey kid too, John, Armani had to learn to do a lot of things,
Mm,
because his mom worked in the home health field, and she would have to leave home so early, so he would have to let himself out to go to school and then let himself back in. And he learned to cook from our mother, from us, all of the women around him, and got pretty good at it,
yeah.
and he loved fashion and music. Yeah.
Mm,
So he was a fun loving person, and anybody that knew him, even the people that harmed him, Armani would always want to keep everybody smiling and laughing and having a good time. That was just him as a person.
yeah. When did he figure out that he was gay, or when did you guys hear about that from him?
It was in middle school, because in elementary, Armani would, these individuals that lived in the same apartment complex as him, their parents wasn't so particular about them in their education, but with me and our family, education came first. And when he decided he wanted to try to slack a little bit, I said, no, we're not having it. And he got a little disinterested, in the sixth grade in school, because he was hanging with this certain group of friends
Yeah.
that didn't care about going to school either. But in middle school, when he started to try to skip school, when he walked into the classroom, John, I was already sitting in there.
Okay.
And he would walk in and see me, and he would just drop his head, and everybody would say, "Well, what's that?" And he wouldn't say a word. You wouldn't hear a peep out of him. It was too funny. And this went on, and the teacher, showed her appreciation because she said he's a good student, but he just gets distracted easily. So I would always step into the school, because his mom was always working, and I had that flexibility to
Mhm.
be able to show up at the school at any moment.
Yeah. Well, and you've been showing up for him ever since all this too. You're still showing up for him. Um,
Mhm.
what was there any particular subjects that he was good at, or did he figure out like a career that he wanted to gravitate towards?
He loved that home ec class to
Hmm.
where the cooking and the sewing, because he loved fashion, and once he learned to cook, he got good at it. So that home economic class was where he excelled.
Yeah.
Now, he knew he had to take care of the English and the math and the history because he there was no way he was going to get around it, not with me being involved.
Hmm.
But he gravitated to that economic class to where the cooking, and Armani loved fashion, and he used to try to dress his mom and everybody else around him. No, you need to wear this, and that doesn't look good. And he would buy clothing, for his mom, and she was like, "Well, how do you know I like that?" He's, "Well, it just look good on you," you know. So, and he had hope too to start doing hair, to start his own
Yeah.
business doing that. And so I just hope that he didn't. I mean, just hate that he didn't get a chance to realize that dream.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I know that there was mug shots that were floating around. The Charlie Project page was basically all mug shots. I did
Mhm,
run the records check. I saw all the mug shots as well. Um,
mhm.
what happened with him and crime? Where did his problems with crime start? And it, from what I saw, it was all like really small petty theft type stuff. How did that start?
Yes. Hanging with these individuals that violently assaulted him. Well, one of the three people that violently assaulted him tied in with that person. And this person relentlessly pursued our money on three different occasions to intentionally cause him physical harm. And like you said, hanging around with this particular person that started that petty crime. And those were the arrests that resulted in those mugshots. And it wasn't until the Charlie Project to where I saw the mugshot. And even when they referred to Armani's case, when Malaysia Buka was assaulted in that same apartment complex where Armani lived with his mom, is when I saw that mugshot because it was featured on MTV Crimes.
Uh,
And they were talking about Malaysia's story, and they lumped our money into her story at that point. So I had even reached out to MTV Crime Site. Well, why didn't you guys try to reach out to Armani's family to get their point of view and perspective when you were doing the Malaysia Booker story when they're both from Dallas, Texas?
yeah.
That's the part of it too that I didn't understand.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a frustration that a lot of families deal with in
Mhm.
missing persons cases and in murder cases. Just like, why is that other one getting all this press? You know, and we saw a lot of it when the Gabby Petito case happened. There was so
Mhm.
many families of the missing just going, why? Like, why? They're spending all this time on that case, and we can't get anyone to even talk about my missing daughter or my missing son. So yeah, I definitely understand the frustration around that. Um, so it sounds like fell into a little bit of a bad crowd. Did that start in like the high school years?
In that middle school age, because that's when he wanted to start to begin to skip school.
Okay.
And he began to hang with this crowd. And these individuals, they all grew up in the same community.
Uh-huh.
Together, whether they lived in the same apartment complex at one point in time together, or where they lived in the same neighborhood, you know, around the corner or a couple of blocks over. And Armani became involved in that petty crime when he was dealing with this one female that's one of the three perpetrators. And those mug shots uh, were taken at the same time that the both of them were arrested at the same time for these petty crimes.
Okay. Gotcha. And I was kind of
Mhm,
surprised because in looking at the charges, first of all, I was surprised at, you know, it was these petty theft crimes. When I see that trend, I usually
mhm,
see drug charges as well. And I didn't really
mhm,
see that here, but I think based on a previous interview I heard with you, he did have
mhm.
some issues with drugs as well, right?
Yes, sir, he did. He did. He fell into that bad habit as well, running with this same crowd. And our money, in my opinion, chose to start using drugs because he was battling not feeling not wanted by his biological father.
Mm.
That was a thorn in his side. That he would always bring up.
Yeah.
Uh, because everybody around him, at least would see their fathers from time to time, but he wouldn't see his at all. And his dad was actually ashamed of our money because our money, identified as being a gay male.
Mm.
And that was his fault. He missed out, on being around his son, and being able to love him for the person that he was.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to make a clarification because I know among different generations and ages, some people consider marijuana use, and I think in Texas it's still technically illegal, or it's not. It's decriminalized, but I don't think it's legal for recreational use yet. Are we talking some weed smoking, or are we talking some more serious things in terms of the drug use?
Well, in terms of the drug use, he did do a little weed smoking, but I believe what Armani's main problem was that it was a drug they called ice. is
Mm,
is what I was told,
okay.
something that he had begun to experiment with.
Yeah.
And and to my knowledge too, cocaine
Okay.
usage. And I couldn't understand that because that was something that he couldn't afford.
Right.
So he consumed it being amongst other people that had readily access to it.
Hmm.
But for him, the drug would always be mentioned as ice.
Yeah.
From what I was told, and he did experiment with smoking marijuana, but that was something that he didn't really want to be bothered with because police were after people too much, with smelling it and arresting them for small amounts and different things and what have you. But marijuana wasn't a big thing for him. It was mainly that drug that they called ice.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So yeah, that explains it. I think the addictiveness that we're talking about, it
Mhm.
being more of an upper, um, yeah, that I'm starting to see where the small crimes kind of help feed that addiction a little bit. So
Yes.
he's got this kind of bad crowd that he's hanging out with, but typically, yeah, they might not get along all the time, but they kind of get along. What happened with this group that all of a sudden some of them were targeting Armani?
Personal vendettas, John. These personal vendettas resulted in these three separate individuals targeting Armani. And this one female, there were three known perpetrators, one female and two male.
Okay.
And this one male he met his demise in November of 2019 when he was shot and killed while committing additional crimes in and around Dallas area.
Hmm.
And then there's the second male perpetrator who was Armani's same-sex partner. And when Armani no longer wanted to be in that intimate same-sex relationship with the second male perpetrator, is when the violence became more frequent.
Okay.
Because Armani no longer wanted to be, in that intimate relationship with this person anymore, because he became violent once Armani said, "Look, I've had enough."
Right.
And on top of that, too, John, this second male perpetrator had a live-in girlfriend you
Right.
know. Yeah, and he was denying to her and his immediate family that he was in an intimate relationship with my nephew Armani. But for the people that knew Armani closely and lived in the same complex and our family, we knew him to be in a relationship with this person. So he could deny to the girlfriend all he want, but there were people that visually witnessed this same sex relationship.
Did the girlfriend ever come after Armani?
She started to harass Armani via telephone once
Okay.
she discovered that her living boyfriend was in an intimate relationship with Armani. And Armani told her, he said, "Well, your should be with me. Your issue should be with your boyfriend."
Hmm.
Because he said, I'm not holding him to this relationship. I'm not tying him to this relationship. He wants to be in this relationship with me. And this had gone on. The relationship had gone on for more than 2.5, almost 3 years before she even discovered
Oh, wow. Wow.
it.
So
Exactly.
yeah, I've heard you talk about three attacks in particular, and you did send me video. Which number is the video from?
The number that was the second assault.
Okay, so tell me about the first one. What happened in the first assault?
The first assault, the female perpetrator was aided by her two teenage sons in violently assaulting Armani once she tracked him down. She tracked him down like an animal on three separate occasions to intentionally cause him physical harm. And one thing about Armani, well, when things were in an uproar for him, he would retreat home and he would stay home for weeks at a time
Hmm.
before even venturing back outside. And when she couldn't find him, she knew he was home. So she would wait around, and Armani was her prey. So when she located him, it was the week of May the 22nd, 2017, when
Okay.
she and her two teenage sons violently assaulted Armani. That was the first time. And then between the time of May 22nd and May 30th, uh, she couldn't find him anywhere. So that's when she started calling Armani's home. She called all day May the 30th, just nonstop. When the phone would stop ringing, she would dial again. When the phone stopped ringing, this went on for 24 hours, just nonstop.
Wow.
And that has to be a crazy person to sit and dial a phone that many times.
I was thinking
And she
she's lit up on something. Yeah.
that anger,
Yeah.
that vendetta that she had against him. And I'll tell you this, John, and I tell everybody, I'm an open book.
Mhm.
I don't have anything to hide. Armani is deceased. He's gone. And I'm fighting for justice for him. I don't have anything to hide. What this female would solicit Armani's help with each and every month for about 2.5, 3 years. She had several children. I know she had at least four,
Mhm.
and she was receiving government assistance when she would get these food stamp benefits. And she would solicit Armani's help to sell a portion of these food stamps each month in exchange for cash in order to buy the drugs that they would consume together.
Yeah.
So at some point in this deal, something went wrong. And they had been doing it for 2.5, almost 3 years. So
Right.
whatever went wrong with this deal between her and Armani is what caused her personal vendetta against him. And so she solicited the help of one of the two male perpetrators. Armani's same-sex partner didn't have anything to do with that personal vendetta, but
Right.
Armani's same-sex partner, this female perpetrator, and then the deceased perpetrator, they all knew each other very well.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
the deceased perpetrator was a low-level drug dealer within the community. Armani's same-sex partner was a low-level drug dealer within the community. And Armani and this female perpetrator, when they would sell the portion of the food stamps in exchange for cash, Armani's same-sex partner would be the low-level drug dealer that they would sometimes obtain their drugs from.
Right.
And
Right.
then the deceased low-level drug dealer would sometimes supply the drugs as well. So
Okay.
this is a circle of people that knew one another. When I say they knew each other and knew each other well, that's
Yeah.
what I mean.
Yeah.
You know,
So
there's no mistaking it.
so the first attack, did that happen on the 22nd or the 30th of May?
It was the week of May the 22nd. And the
Okay.
second attack happened May the 31st. It was seconds after the gun bullet pierced through the apartment living room window.
Okay. Okay. So I'm surprised at how close this time frame is with everything, because basically
Mhm,
we're leading up to June, and then we get into the
mhm.
first week of June and Armani disappears.
Exactly. After he was violently assaulted on June the 3rd, the same day he went missing. That was the third violent assault at the hands of this female perpetrator.
Okay. So here's the video that we have from the second assault. I've removed the audio and we've
Okay.
blurred faces just to be safe here, but
Hmm.
we can see that's Armani that just got hit, and
Hmm. By
that's
the female
Armani
perpetrator.
getting knocked down. So she's there with, it looks like, at least two other women.
The young lady with the white t-shirt on and the dark shorts, that's her
Yeah.
young daughter. That's her young daughter.
Okay.
So she lumped her young daughter into this crime.
Wow.
Exactly.
Wow. And on top of all that, someone's filming it from inside of a car. Who filmed this?
The person that knows the female perpetrator.
So they knew it was going to happen. Like the timing
Yes,
of this is almost like it's coordinated. Like they're firing up their camera.
yes,
It's still pointing inside the car. They swing it outside. And it's
yes,
literally like that was the cue for, okay, go ahead and hit him now.
yes, yes. And I'm telling you, John, it was as soon as the gun bullet pierced through the living room window, Armand and his mom ventured outside to ask the bystanders, did they see who it was who fired the gunshot into the apartment living room window?
Yeah.
And the female perpetrator you see in the video assaulting Armani uh, was a former resident of that same apartment complex. So the bystanders were loyal to this person and did not come forward to ID that person as being the shooter out of
Do you,
loyalty to the person.
yeah, do you think Armani went out there to confront the person knowing that you're probably the one that just shot at my
No,
mom's
he did.
place?
No, sir. He didn't have any idea she was out there. She was out lurking and waiting for him to
Okay.
come out. He didn't see her when he exited his home. Didn't see her at all. Didn't even know she was there.
Hmm.
Had no
S-
clue she was there.
So when does the third attack happen and what happens in that attack?
The third attack happened June the 3rd.
Okay.
Again, tracked him down away from his home, relentlessly pursuing him, tracked him down. And this female perpetrator and the deceased male perpetrator uh, together assaulted our money that day. And it's ironic that there were several individuals that could give me a play-by-play description of our money being violently assaulted on June the 3rd, but you fail to go and tell investigators. But you want to tell me. I didn't understand that. And these people call themselves his friend, on Facebook, rest in peace, our money, and my friend. Uh, Save it, save it, and keep it for another day. Because if you called yourself a friend to him and you cared anything about him, then you would have gone to law enforcement as soon as it happened.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So does law enforcement get involved with this at all? I'm surprised. Like when I was asking you for documentation, I'm surprised I didn't see any police reports around any of this.
The police report that's dated May the 31st, the day of the deadly conduct firearm shooting incident, the reporting officer, DPD officer, uh, falsely accused some other person, don't know who this person is, as being the actual shooter.
Yeah, did he say that he heard that name from someone? Like he had to hear it from a witness or something for it to get in there, right?
I have no idea where that name came from. And that's what I have been trying to find out. Well, where did he get this name from? Because our money clearly, his mom clearly informed the police as to who the suspected shooter was, because this person had called her home all night the night before, all night the day of the shooting. He had
Yeah.
called 2 days in a row, May the 30th and May the 31st. And when she couldn't lure our money outside his home with these harassing phone calls, is when all of a sudden the bullet came piercing through the living room window. And that's what brought our money outside his home.
Wow. Wow.
He and his mother both went outside to 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 ask bystanders, did they see who the shooter was? Armani didn't go out to confront her because he had no idea she was outside.
Right.
And then Armani's mom at the time, she was around at the leasing office with the leasing manager trying to review the security camera footage to see if they could see image of the actual shooter, at the time the gun bullet pierced through the living room window. But unfortunately, John, unfortunately again, for Armani and I, the security cameras mounted right outside Armani's unit was inoperable.
I hear that so often and it kills me every time. It's
Mhm,
unbelievable that you have these cameras everywhere and either they're
mhm.
they're dummies, they actually never work, or they're
Exactly.
supposed to work and they don't.
Exactly. And in this apartment complex is a low income apartment complex. And the only thing they care about is collecting that money for HUD every month.
Yeah.
That's the only thing they care about. They could care less about the tenants and what's actually going on the property. But Armani's mom was at the leasing office with the leasing manager reviewing the cameras at the time our money was being assaulted right outside his front door in that video that video clip. So
Wow.
by a resident went to the leasing office to alert Armani's mom. Your son is being violently assaulted, right outside your home. So as she was approaching the scene, the female perpetrator and her young daughter jumped into an SUV and sped away from the apartment complex. Now, the security cameras were not working, mounted right outside Armani and his mom's apartment complex unit, but the camera did catch the suspect speeding out of the apartment near the apartment complex near the leasing office.
Oh.
But the catch to that too, John, is that it was a license plate attached to the vehicle that didn't belong to the vehicle.
Oh, jeez. Wow.
The license tag on the car on that SUV belonged to a smaller car.
Sure, sure. And they probably just swapped plates so that it was registered or something. And yeah,
She intentionally did that.
yeah. Um,
Yeah.
all right. So the June 3rd attack,
hmm
Armani gets attacked somewhere, but Armani disappears on that same day, right?
Yes, that is correct. He disappeared on the same day. Um, there were two um female residents in the same apartment complex where Armani lived actually saw him bloodied, after that violent assault and rendered him aid, to try to get him cleaned up because he was violently assaulted by the female perpetrator and the deceased male perpetrator. Those two together violently assaulted Armani on June the 3rd, which
How do
was
we
the last.
know? How do we know that that wasn't the attack that actually ended his life? Like
Uh,
later, from the injuries.
the there were two females. One supposedly called herself Armani's friend and had been knowing Armani and my youngest daughter for years. Like I said, they were giving me details as though they were on the scene to see it. Apparently, this female perpetrator caught up with Armani again at some point.
Okay.
From and at that point is when he never showed up again.
Okay. Okay. So
Mhm.
you've got this person that calls themselves a friend that saw him twice that day then, effectively,
Yes,
right? Okay.
yes. And according to this person told me that Armani actually left the female perpetrator with a black eye June the 3rd. And out of all things, John, the female perpetrator that relentlessly pursued Armani to intentionally cause him harm, the one you saw assaulting him in that video, the following day, June the 4th, she filed a false police report accusing Armani of assault when she already knew that he would no longer be alive to refute what she was saying.
Mm.
So
Hmm.
she filed a false police report June the 4th, accusing Armani of assaulting her.
So we get to the point where your family has no idea that anything tragic has happened yet. This is basically a missing persons case.
Yes.
What was your last conversation with Armani? What was that about and when?
The last conversation I had with Armani, he was happy. He was smiling. Nothing seemed wrong. If there was anything wrong, I didn't know it. And my youngest daughter had a close bond with Armani. Anything nefarious like that going on, she would know firsthand. But from my point of view, the last time I saw him, he was happy. Nothing seemed wrong. I had no idea anything was wrong. But
Yeah.
but all the time this was brewing, these personal vendettas. And it just didn't make sense. I've said they had that big of a problem with him, didn't go to law enforcement. But the reason that this female perpetrator didn't want to go to law enforcement about it because she was committing crimes, selling a portion of her food stamps in order to purchase drugs.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then this is the icing on the cake, John. It was a female uh, homicide detective that handles juvenile missing person cases for Dallas police. She was the police officer that actually received Armani's want to locate, which is their missing persons report.
Okay.
And she reached out to my youngest daughter, who was the one who actually reported Armani missing. Now, this particular homicide detective uh, went out in the field to interview the female perpetrator you saw in the video to get an understanding from her as to why she continued to relentlessly pursue Armani. And she lied about it initially. And what she did tell the homicide detective was that Armani stole $400 from her, which is why she was relentlessly pursuing him to assault him. She said, "When you say stole $400, what do you mean?" And she didn't say cash. She didn't explain that they were selling a portion of her food stamps. in order to purchase drugs. So she said, well, he stole from my EBT card. And, that's why I was angry with him. She said, well, your EBT card has a 4-digit personal code. That's a code that only you should know. So if he stole from the card, how did he get your PIN number, your personal PIN number? And that's when she said, well, I gave it to him one day to go to the store. She said, well, he didn't steal it. He did
Yeah.
not steal
Yeah.
it.
Wow.
Yeah. So at that point, she told a little bit of the truth,
Right.
you know.
Right. Well, she was
So
backed into the corner. I mean, she had to explain it.
that's true.
So
Yeah.
is the last person to have seen Armani this person that called herself a friend of his?
Mhm.
She's the last person to see him?
Um, I don't know if she was the last person, but she was one of the last people to see him.
Okay.
I don't know if she was actually the last person to see him, but she was one of the last people.
Okay. And when does the family figure out that something is wrong? Like how many days pass where you're not hearing from Armani before you guys know?
It was my youngest daughter, because she talked to him every day. And the fact that she had not heard from him, uh, once, she learned of him being violently assaulted that day while she was at work, and she actually left work that day,
Hmm.
when someone contacted her to tell her about the violent assault.
Yeah.
And she started to look, she called 911 to report him missing. And of course, um, he's missing because he wants to be missing. He's an adult,
Right.
is what
Right.
they say. So they advised her to call Neighbors. She in turn called Neighbors to report him missing. Neighbors told her to call DPD.
Yeah,
So
you can't just start. I mean, the first thing NamUs would do is contact DPD to confirm that
mhm,
there's a missing persons report. Like that they
mhm.
were they were going backwards.
They
Wow.
did. So one telling her to call the other.
Yeah.
And so at that point she became frustrated and just started to look for him on her own. And
Mhm.
so days went by. She was still looking for him, in places that she knew him to frequent, and people that they both knew. My youngest daughter, Armani, knew some of the same people.
Mhm.
And so she went looking for him in different places. And once, she said, well, she kept it to herself for some days. I can tell you that, John, because she was hoping against hope that she could find him, even
Yeah.
if he had been injured. She was hoping that she could find him. But when it got to the point to where she was overwhelmed and had lost hope, she is when she reached out to my oldest daughter, her sister, and she said to her, she said, "Well, we call him Money for short, Moni."
Hmm.
And said he haven't heard from him, he's missing. And my oldest daughter, she then told me, she said, Mom, uh, haven't heard from our money. We just don't know what's going on at this point. Then days turned into weeks, John.
Yeah.
And, uh, during this time frame, it was hot weather outside, then it was rainy weather outside. So when
Hmm.
his remains were found, and this is information that I know personally in firsthand, is that his personal belongings were embedded in the soil, because the weather had changed so much.
Okay.
And
Okay. Let's take us through that discovery. How are his remains found?
there were two 911 callers. They both were male. And in the NBC5 News 2003 interview, that I on camera interview that I did with Candace Sweat,
Hmm.
um, there was a gentleman that lived in that dead end cul-de-sac,
Yeah.
because where Armani's remains were found is in a residential dead end cul-de-sac. And so the gentleman saw the TV cameras and myself and Candace Sweat and the cameraman, and he was curious. He came out to the edge of the road and started looking. And so eventually he did come down the street and he asked the cameraman, what are you guys doing? Because they sold drugs in that dead end now. And he
Yeah.
wanted to
Yeah.
find out what were we doing and what were we filming for. And so the cameraman told him, said, well, the young lady's nephew was murdered in this area back in 2017, and we're just doing a segment to try to get attention to the case. And he said, well, I was the one to call 911 because I found the skull.
Isn't that amazing? What are the odds? Yeah,
Hmm.
that's amazing.
Nobody but God.
Yeah,
That's nobody but God, John, because had that man not discovered our money skull, we would still be wondering today where he was.
yeah. Now he said that a dog was carrying the skull when he saw it.
That is correct. That is correct. That's how he explained it. And before he would start talking, Candace Sweat, the news journalist, she said, I want this to be raw footage. She said, do you mind being filmed?
Yeah,
And she said, in a few minutes, I'll cue you. And then you explain to Miss Johnson how you came about discovering her nephew's skull. And he's a plumber. And he said he was getting ready to leave his residence in that dead end cul-de-sac. And as he was approaching the corner at the stop sign, he saw the dog walking with the skull in his mouth. And that's when he got out and he retrieved Armani's skull from the dog's mouth.
wow.
And at that point is when I told him, I said, had it not been for you, then my sister and our family would not have known what happened to our money. Well, we wouldn't know where he was. We'll just say that.
Yeah,
And this was just less than a minute around the corner, from where Armand and his mom lived. So, I thanked him because I'm truly grateful. Because had it not been for him, we wouldn't have had the remains that we did have to make the rest.
yeah. It's amazing, and it's something that I know we talk about a lot of very troubling situations here on the channel. But to
Yeah.
hear stories like that, someone just doing the right thing, going the
Yeah.
extra, taking just that little extra step, like literally
Hmm.
changed the world for somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
really appreciate him. Have you spoken to him since the NBC5 thing?
No, I tried to reach out to him, but I didn't want him to think that I was harassing him or invading his space.
Yeah.
But I did let him know that day that I would like to have another conversation with him
Okay.
as well, because it was a second 911 caller. He saw the first 911 caller uh, retrieving Armani's skull from the dog, and he waited on DPD for 45 minutes, John, for them to come once he retrieved Armani's skull from the dog's mouth. And they never showed up within that 45 minutes. And he had a plumbing job he had to do. So he had to leave. He was
Wow.
already late,
Yeah.
en route to the customer. And he said the fact that they never showed up, he just laid Armani's skull there where law enforcement saw it when they finally arrived to the scene. And
Okay.
so the second 911 caller called 911 to say, well, I saw a guy in a black short bed pickup truck milling around out where the remains were. And it was
Mhm.
actually the guy that discovered Armani's skull, because he wanted to see which direction the dog was walking in because the dog removed Armani's skull from against this huge tree,
Okay.
that was in this residential field that they're calling a lot. It's a residential lot that didn't have a house on it.
Got it.
And so he was trying to see which direction the dog was coming from, and as law enforcement I always say, animals will transport remains,
Yeah.
from one area to another. And I would tell them before we even knew that only six of our money's remains were in this location. Uh, well, a dog wouldn't carry off an entire skeletal system. There's
Right.
just no way.
Right.
I can understand moving a bone or two,
Yeah.
but not an entire skeletal system. No way.
So only
And the
six
fact
bones?
six, his skull is one of the six included.
Okay.
Six
Was
total.
yeah, what were any items of Armani's found close to those
Yeah.
bones?
Yes, sir. Armani's purse is one of the items
Okay.
that was recovered, and the contents inside were listed on the autopsy report. A key fob belonging to a Chrysler car. Armani never owned a car, and there were drug paraphernalia, whatever this was that Armani used to smoke that ice with.
Okay.
That drug paraphernalia was inside that purse. Excuse me. And then also too inside that purse, John, was a female's phone number. And so when law enforcement obtained or retrieved that cell phone number from Armani's purse, they called the person whose name was attached to that phone number. So they actually interviewed that person the same day Armani's remains were found. And that person was the one that alerted my youngest daughter that Armani's remains in article of clothing in his purse were recovered, from around the corner where he lived. It wasn't law enforcement that did the death notification. They didn't do a proper death notification at all. They didn't even inform the family that we suspect this may be your loved one. They didn't tell us that at all. We found out from somebody else.
Well, and I showed the audience just a quick screenshot of the second page of the incident report here, and there's nothing. There's like, it's the lightest form I've ever seen. It's like practically not filled out.
Yeah.
But they had Armani's purse. Was there any identifiable, like any ID in there? Did they know based on the contents of the purse that this was Armani?
No. The phone number that was inside that purse led them to knowing that it was Armani.
Okay.
The person's name that was on the phone number, this person actually provided Armani with her cell phone number when they rendered aid to him that day when he was violently assaulted on June the 3rd. That's how
Gotcha.
he ended up with that phone number in that purse. And she informed her sister, she alerted her sister. She said, you need to contact Armani's cousin and let her know that law enforcement found my phone number in Armani's purse. She said that they came to her with an accusatory tone, as though she had something to do with it because her phone number was found in Armani's purse. And she said, no, she said, well, we were good friends. And these two young ladies are actually true friends. Now, we can call these true friends of Armani's. And they actually lived in the same apartment complex at one point as Armani and his mom, but they had since moved away. But one of the sisters still lived there, and I'm not quite sure if she still lives there right now today or not. But it was through these two young ladies that we learned that Armani's remains were discovered that day. That's how
That's
we
amazing.
found out as a family.
Like, I mean, it just blows my mind. It's like the neighborhood network is working better for you at this point
Yes, sir.
than law
Yes, sir.
enforcement.
And it has
Um,
been that way from the outset. It has
yeah.
been that way. Everything that I've learned, tip and information wise, that I've taken to law enforcement has been through this community where
Wow.
our money lived. And believe it or not, John, 90% of what I carried back to the initial homicide detective, when he looked into it finally, it's exactly what the community said it was.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned the purse, an article
Hmm.
of clothing.
Hmm.
So it does seem like Armani's body was at that location.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I could clearly see that our money, what he was last seen wearing,
Hmm.
we knew that to be what he was last seen wearing. And I tell you, John, it just looked like somebody tried to rip it, off of him. It had rips and tears in it. And I asked the medical examiner's death investigator, um, because we had heard that he had been assaulted with a machete. And so we asked her point blank, the day that Armani's mom went in to provide her biological DNA to match against the skeletal remains, to legally and positively identify the remains of her son. But it took several weeks. So she submitted her DNA July the 31st, 2017, and it wasn't until October the 16th, 2016, because I called the ME's office uh many times, every week. Do you have the results yet? Do you have the results yet? And she said no. So just October the 16th, the day that I called was the last time I called her now. Well, do you have the results back yet? And she said, yes, Miss Johnson, we received the results back today. She said, and they did come back as a match to Armani's mom's biological DNA. And my heart just fell.
Yeah.
We knew it, but to receive that confirmation, it was a blow. It was a
Definitely.
devastating blow.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, with only talking about six bones being found, um, was any trauma noted on the bones? You know, sometimes they will find like where a bullet might have passed through one or a knife might have nicked one. Was there any type of identifiable trauma to the bones?
The medical examiner's death investigator said to us, it was Armani's mom, my youngest daughter, and I at the medical examiner's office that day, and she said that from what we see, there are no marks or striations on the six bones that we've recovered.
Right.
And so when the K9 team did search the area, when they were called out, um, from what I know to be true, is that the K9 dogs, one particular dog, because there were three different sets, hinted on skeletal remains, but the dog had gotten injured and the dog couldn't search any further because of all the brush in the limbs, broken limbs and things in that area. So
Mm-hmm.
this particular canine individual suggested that DPD go back out and do another search because the dog still hinted, that there were additional skeletal remains in the area, but they never went back, John. They never went back to do the search. And when the current homicide detective was brought on to Armani's case, he was brought on July the 21st, 2023, as the current homicide detective in charge of actively pursuing and investigating Armani's case. So I asked him, when are you guys going to go back out and do another search? And he said, well, we had no plans because according to the reports that we have, there was no need to go back out. But I knew different. So I challenged him on it.
Yeah.
And so I asked him, when would he be going back out? And he, was reluctant to do it, but eventually did do the search again. But I don't have any details as to when they actually went back out to search. And that's what I'm hoping to find out when I go to this meeting on June the 18th,
Okay. Okay.
2025,
Yeah.
because I want to see the
Basically,
actual.
yeah. Robin has just been contacted and lined up a new meeting with investigators to happen in a few weeks, and hopefully she'll get some more details on all that. Now, I know one thing you did hear from a detective previously was that they weren't really going to keep trying with this case too much because it was determined that somehow it was determined this was an overdose situation.
Yes, and that was from the outset, John, actually. They have been telling me from the outset, there is no further lead. There's no further leads. How can you say there are no further leads to follow up on when his case evidence hasn't been tested? Case evidence are leads
Yeah,
because that case evidence is going to take you somewhere. But you have to perform the forensic testing in order for that case evidence to take you to the next place.
right, right. Well, and it's interesting because I think they're trying to make a separation between the attacks that happened to Armani and Armani's death. But that you would think, especially with the timing of those attacks, that is a lead in itself. And all
Yes.
of the information pertaining to the attacks is potentially leads for your murder investigation.
Mhm.
But that's where this twist is weird about how would they know it's an overdose when you have six bones?
Exactly. And I asked the initial homicide detective that because November the 8th, 2017 was the day of Armani's actual graveside ceremony and his cremation ceremony. Um, because mind you, his mom was only presented with the six skeletal remains, to cremate, to lay him to rest. And so it was pouring down raining that day. And I had previously arranged that meeting, which was the first meeting, in-person meeting with this homicide detective, since he was assigned. He was assigned to Armani's case October the 21st. And so just so happened we arranged it for November the 8th, and just so happened Armani's graveside ceremony was November the 8th. And like I said, it was pouring down rain. And so I asked his mom, I said, "Oh, you still going?" Because I'm going. And she said, "Yes." So we go down and we walk into this conference room. And he sat across the table from us, John, and he looked us square in the face, eyeball to eyeball. He had had Armani's case all of 17 days. And he sat across that table from Armani's mom and I and said, "Well, Armani OD'd in this vacant field." And his mother and I just came unglued. I said, "Well, you've had his case all of 17 days. You look at skeletal remains without a full investigation, and you say that he OD'd in this field." And I just despise them referring to it as a field. It's a vacant residential lot,
Right.
you know, because they referred to our money for a long time, bones found in the field. Bones found in the field when he had already been positively and legally identified, but they're still referring to him as bones in a field. His name is Armani Dante Morgan. Say his name. Say his name. He's been identified. But he did. He sat across that table and said, "Your son OD'd in the vacant field." And she said, "Well, if he wanted to OD, he could have OD'd at home because I'm at work all the time. If he wanted to kill himself, he would have killed himself at home and not in a vacant field." But I want to ask you, John, even a person that may not be in their right mind, who would crawl into a bush, because it was a line of bush in front of this huge tree, who would crawl into a bush up against a huge tree, OD and die in a field,
Right.
in a
Right.
like a lot?
Yeah.
You know, come on with it. And so for several weeks and months, I continued to provide him with tips, leads, and information to dispel his theory that our money OD'd. And then when I continued to uh, challenge him on it, is when I don't know if I sent you that screenshot of his text message where he said that I don't have a theory
Yeah.
about our money,
Hmm.
but we don't have the information to confirm that he was murdered, but we believe he was murdered. We just have to get the facts. Okay, well, why didn't you say that in the beginning, as
Yeah.
opposed to with your personal predetermined theory about him? Because he was gay and in living in an impoverished neighborhood and had a prior arrest history, you just assumed this about him.
Right.
That's not your job and your place to assume. Your job and your place is to investigate, a full investigation, not your predetermined theory, your personal theory about what may have happened to our money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I love about you, Robin, is how you are dealt these bad hands by things, systems that you're supposed to trust, like law enforcement, like the media. And some people would be so upset and so angry that they would quit trying to use those systems. But you don't. You keep going back and you keep presenting new information and you keep ringing those numbers. And because of that, it's leading you to these experiences like we're having here today, where you're getting to share this story again and clear up these misconceptions and get some better information out there. I just I know Armani is extremely proud of how much work you're doing with all this and how you're honoring him in this way. And I'm just very moved by your tenacity. It's amazing. It
Yes,
really
and
is.
one thing about it, John, what drives me is the grief that I see on his mom's face. This is her son and only child. And I cannot imagine, I cannot put myself in her shoes because both of my children are still living today. And what's so ironic is that our money and my youngest daughter had a close bond, as though they were sister and brother as opposed to first cousins. And then our money shared the same birthday as my oldest daughter,
Hmm.
December the 19th. You know, both of them share the same birthday. And it's bittersweet, the fact that we grieve our money and then we have to try to figure out a way to celebrate my daughter as well. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's always bittersweet and we have to find a common balance when there is no balance. You just have to try to make the best of the moment each
Yeah.
year when that time rolls around. It's a bitter pill to swallow.
Absolutely. Um, I'm very curious. Did Armani have a cell phone?
Armani had several different phones. The thing with Armani, John, and cell phones, he would lose one and his mom would purchase another
Okay.
because she always wanted him to have a way to call. And with these cell phones, two of the cell phones that Armani used prior to his sudden disappearance, they actually belonged to Armani and were in Armani's name with Metro PCS. And the third phone that we knew Armani to use, we don't know where he obtained that phone from, but he used it all the time. And believe it or not, the cold case detective that was in charge of Armani's case for 6 months, the only action that he took, John, was to sit down with me July the 10th, 2019. That was the initial conversation with him. The second action that he took was the second and the last action. He issued a warrant for one of the three phone numbers that Armani utilized.
Okay.
When he used three, he only subpoenaed records for one. And he never went any further with any, to pursue any of the other cell phone numbers. The two that were in actually in Armani's name. Never made any effort to do that.
Has any effort been made since?
No.
That seems like another one of those threads that really should be pulled on.
That's true.
Especially if you could try to pinpoint if he would have had one particular one with him on that day. Because it's not just about who he might have been communicating with. I mean, yes, that'd be important, especially, text communication and phone communication, but, GPS or location tracking, even cell tower pinging, just tracing his steps a bit more that day to understand maybe where he went, who he met up with. Um,
Mhm.
I'm really surprised that they didn't go about it that way. Well, the people that attacked Armani, do you know, have they ever been interviewed by a detective working his death investigation?
The only two of the three perpetrators that were interviewed was the female perpetrator, but they never brought her into police headquarters to interview her. They would always locate her out amongst the community somewhere, track her that way to interview her. Never brought her to the station to actually interview her. And with Armani's same-sex partner, they interviewed him while he was in Dallas County Jail. They interviewed him and asked him what was his relationship with Armani and was he in a same-sex relationship with Armani, and he denied it.
Okay.
Uh, he said that our money was selling drugs for somebody or something else he was accusing Armani of doing, but he denied being in an intimate relationship with Armani, and he denied having any involvement with Armani, other than drugs, you know, and supposedly accusing Armani of dealing drugs for somebody else and not him.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
but he denied, but they did ask him during that interview if he owned a machete. So he did own up to owning a machete, which he brandished to threaten his victims, including my nephew. And it had been said amongst this community. And I had a relationship with a cold case panel back in 2021, John.
Hmm.
I was referred to this cold case panel review team by a former New York homicide detective that had retired, Dennis Griffin.
Yeah.
He had the Transparency Project, and I was referred to him. And so he had impaneled this cold case review panel, and he referred them to me, and they began to perform an investigative review of Armani's unsolved murder. And what the female investigator said to me, she said, one thing is certain, Ms. Johnson, she said, there's word from the street, she said, but this constant word from the street is that Armani was murdered. She said, and that has to be considered, that has to be taken into consideration. She
Yeah.
said, as opposed to these predetermined theories and personal opinions about what may have happened. She said, because you can't take these personal opinions into the courtroom.
Right.
You
Right.
you're gonna have to be able to matter of factly prove, what happened to him.
Yeah.
But the female perpetrator wasn't brought down to the station for an interview. The male perpetrator that was in the same sex relationship with Armani was never brought down to police station for an interview. None of the three were.
When you speak to the investigators in a few weeks, I would ask them about the clothing item that was found and if any analysis was done on the tears or the rips on it to see if they were caused by a blade, because those types of tears or rips should be quite different than an animal. There might be, cleaner, finer edges that happen in the fabric if it was done by a blade.
Mm.
I would definitely ask them about that. On Web Sleuths, which she is very active on, and I'll have a link to that in the description box below. You stated that law enforcement's bias and predetermined theory about Armani as a gay male negatively impacted his unsolved disappearance and brutal murder from the outset. What
Yeah.
if you could sum up their theory, the theory that you're fighting against? What is it? What is their main theory about this case?
The theory is the initial homicide detective's theory that Armani OD'd and
Okay.
not that he was murdered. That's the theory. That's the theory,
I mean,
and
what gets me about that is like, we're talking about such a small amount of remains being found there. I understand we have
mhm,
a clothing item and we have some personal effects, but in other cases I've looked into, sometimes remains will be spread around because people are hoping that none of that stuff gets found.
mhm,
And I'm just wondering, and now we're talking about, at least word on the street keeps mentioning this machete, that this machete might be involved. It's just
mhm.
interesting to me that you would defer to, yeah, this person crawled up in a bush because they were doing drugs and had an overdose situation out there.
Mhm.
Um,
And I can tell you this, John, for certain, that there is case evidence that can absolutely change Armani's current cause and manner of death from undetermined homicide. But DPD higher ups passed the message from the Dallas homicide supervisory officer to me to tell me that DPD don't feel the need to spend taxpayer dollars to perform forensic testing on Armani's case evidence to prove that he was murdered. And I asked, I said, well, if Armani's mom and I are not taxpayers, then who the hell are we?
yeah,
Our tax dollars help to pay your salary. And not only does our tax dollars help to pay your salary, our tax dollars also help to fund different projects in and around the city that Dallas police feel the need for these projects to be, brought into existence. So that tells me that there is evidence that just only needs to be tested, but you guys don't feel that we have that right for justice for our money. That part of it I just don't understand. Why isn't he important enough for our tax dollars? His
right,
mine and his mom's tax dollars to be used to prove his murder. That's disheartening.
definitely.
Very
And
disrespectful and disheartening.
it is. And I acknowledge that it's a tough case. Like, and
Yes.
I think you realize that it's a tough case on the evidence front because we're
Mhm.
talking about a small collection of evidence. On the social front, there's tons and tons of information, and it's the frustration there is that they're not necessarily seeing that as an active lead. Seems like they're kind of like, yeah, we'll go talk to these people, see if something shakes out, but they're not really driving at that very hard. Um,
No.
I heard that you had a Texas Ranger that was assisting in some way. Is that still going on? Did anything come from that?
No, unfortunately, I spoke to the Texas Ranger that was assigned to investigate Armani's case, but he told me he never picked up the case to do anything with it. He had it from 2021 until I reached out to him last year in 2024, before the top of the year, and he told me no. He said, "Well, whatever DPD says is what's going to have to happen, or what goes." And I said, "Well, I beg to differ with you on that." And not only that, I also asked DPD to reach out to Texas Attorney General's cold case unit to have them to perform an investigative review of Armani's case as well. I haven't been able to find out the status or if they're even actively pursuing it. But I have some angels in my corner that's been reaching out to
Yeah.
Texas Attorney General's office to find out if they're actively pursuing it or if they've done anything with it. I understand they have a backlog, of
Yeah.
cases, but there's also this Texas State University cold case team that's partnered with the Texas Attorney General's cold case unit. If Texas Attorney General's cold case unit don't have time to investigate it, please allow these students
Mm.
that are in the criminal justice law class,
Yeah.
allow them this opportunity because they've had success to help a law enforcement agency solve a cold case. And they've only been in existence for a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why not allow our money this opportunity? And I want to say this about that gun bullet too, John, is that Avery Moore authorized it June the 17th, 2019, but it was not submitted to the forensic lab until August the 28th of 2019. The cold case detective, initial cold case detective, which was the only cold case detective, was reluctant because he didn't feel the need. He didn't think that anything was going to be gained from submitting it because there's no way the evidence is going to be obtained or extracted from it. Okay, that's your personal opinion,
Right.
but just do what you have been instructed to do.
Yeah.
Is all that I'm asking.
So did it get
But
submitted then?
finally, August the 28th, but again, it wasn't tested. That was August the 28th, 2019, but it wasn't sent to the lab until August of 2024.
Whoa. Wow. Wow. And are we still
Exactly.
waiting? Are we still waiting for results on that?
Well, according to what I was told, they didn't pick up a positive response. That was my reason for asking for Francine Bardot to be allowed and granted the opportunity to perform forensic testing on Armani's case evidence because she has forensic skills and the expertise to obtain this extracted evidence information. And initially, the current homicide detective back in 2024, it was, I want to say it was September, he verbally agreed to allow Francine Bardot the opportunity to perform forensic testing on Armani's case evidence, but when it got down to it, he went back on his word. He did not um, follow through with what he told me. He would allow her that opportunity. Yet instead, they come back to tell me she's not certified, she's not qualified. Francine Bardot has testified in some of the major crimes to date. The Charles Manson case, she worked on that to prove evidence, in that case. So what doesn't qualify her if she worked on a case of that status?
Yeah, no, let's take the audience through this real quick. So the Bardol method is it's used to get DNA profiles off of spent shell casings and other small items of evidence. And for big time true crime fans, you guys have heard of MVAC before. We've talked about MVAC here on the channel before. This method uses that same technology. What it effectively is they have a special solution that they can fire at an object and then they can it'll pick up DNA fragments and they recollect that solution and then they're able to test it for DNA. And then sometimes they'll have to build up the DNA because the amount they get so small, but that'll get them to a profile. So this is stuff that MVAC has been around a long time. There have been many cases solved. I've met with them a few times. One of the cases they told me about was a rock that had been used as a murder weapon. They were able to use a solution to extract DNA from it and then determine who was holding the rock effectively. So this is not like any type of bizarre whacked out science or something like that. This stuff is tried and tested. I know the whole backstory. Like they started this because they were testing. They built this technology for restaurants. They wanted to be sure to try to find bacteria in restaurants. Like this there's scientific backing all over this. Now, the
Mhm.
Bardol method in particular is just kind of a twist on what MVAC does because she helped engineer using it with those particular items. Um,
Yes.
and apparently, those items have a lot of grooves and just rough surfaces, which are great for collecting that type of DNA information.
Mhm.
So that's
Mhm.
unfortunate to hear that you're basically, it's like you're trying to roll a boulder uphill. Like you've got,
Mhm.
an assistant police chief saying, yes, let's go ahead and test it. Um, Finally, after years, you go ahead and get that done. Well, it's not good enough. Well, how about we test it this way? We really don't believe in that. Like, really?
Mhm. Mhm. And I've when I was denied was told that DPD higher ups don't feel the need to spend taxpayer dollars, I reached out to Season of Justice to find out from them what would be the protocol to submit an application, for forensic funding on behalf of Armani.
Yeah.
And I was told that law enforcement would have to be the one to do it. So I asked the current homicide detective, and he said that he would do it. I was informed by Season of Justice that I wouldn't be privy to whether the application was approved or denied. I would have to get that information from DPD as to
Okay.
whether our money's application for forensic funding was approved or not.
Well, there's a possibility that you'll be hearing about that in a few weeks then too, with that meeting that you're having with them, hopefully. And
Hopefully,
I'm
you
hoping
know,
for good news on that.
me as well.
So, what does it mean to have that billboard that you guys have up now?
Whew. I tell you, it means everything. This is something that I have been striving for the past 8 years. When Lamar Advertising um, was generous enough to gift our family with this donated billboard space, it was a heavy weight that was lifted, because this is something that I had been trying to get for the past at that point it was 7.5 years, soon to be 8, because Season of Justice denied my application for funding for billboard for our money because of undetermined. The
Mm,
the undetermined is a plague in Armani's case, because it prevents him from being able to obtain valuable resources that would help me, with gaining additional attention and exposure to his case,
yeah.
such as the billboard funding and forensic funding, and other resources through other nonprofit organizations that will be readily available to him had his cause and manner of death not been noted as undetermined.
Yeah.
But the fact that there is case evidence that can change that, John. But DPD said that they don't want to spend that money on our money to do it. That's disheartening, as well. You
Definitely.
know,
Definitely.
um, I want
I
to
want
say
to
this
give
back.
I just want to thank Lamar Advertising for doing that. And
Yes.
was Solve the Case part of that deal too? Did they help connect you with Lamar, or were they involved in that in any way?
Solve the Case was instrumental in reaching out to Fox 4 to arrange the news media coverage, and was Solve the Case was instrumental in reaching out to NBC5 to coordinate that. I found out, John, last weekend maybe, that it was Nicole Schmidt. It was Gabby Bettino's mom and Haley Gray, an advocate who has been working with me closely since January of this year.
Yeah.
Had it not been for Haley's fearless advocate work, doing not only with me and our family, but with countless families, her fearless advocacy work is unmatched. And I'm truly grateful, and I thank her from the bottom of my heart. It was Haley Gray and Nicole Smith, Gabby's mom, who reached out to Lamar Advertising on our family's behalf. And I
Wow.
learned that from Gabby's mom last weekend, because I emailed her uh, about additional funding in order to try to maintain our money's billboard space.
Yeah.
And she said, well, I was actually instrumental. Haley and I worked together to work with Lamar Advertising to get Armani's billboard space. And I just came unglued. I
Mhm.
cried because I met Gabby's mom in person at the Impact Advocacy Foundation Cold Case Conference in Indianapolis back in March of this year, March the
Yeah.
28th through the 30th.
I
Yeah.
missed you
And
there. I was there, but I was there for a really short window, and unfortunately I
you
didn't get to
were.
meet you. Yeah.
And I was trying to get to your session, get a chance to meet. I was trying to get to everybody,
Yeah.
at
No,
that,
I
it
know.
was just such a short period of time. But I tell you, John, that Cold Case Conference was a huge success and
Yeah.
has made a big difference in our family's life. It truly has.
That's amazing. That's
Truly
amazing
has.
to hear.
And it's afforded me this opportunity with you here today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is the second time that we've talked about Haley here on the channel, and you guys are going to hear more about her because she's helping these families so much.
Yes.
Um, how is Uretta doing 8 years down the road?
No different from the first time we learned
Yeah.
about our money. And is just heartbreaking. Um, Nobody can imagine or fathom, what she's thinking because he's in her thoughts every day, every day, all day. And what I can say is that the space that our money occupied in that home, it is space that she won't revisit, you know. And I can understand. I can truly understand it, but it's heartbreaking to know that that's a space in there that you pass by every day, but you won't enter it.
Yeah.
Um, and nobody knows what that feels like, but her. But at some point, I feel like that's kind of a comfort for her, in
Mhm.
some sense. Um,
Most
because
families
we,
do that. They will leave the room. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
as is, untouched.
Hmm.
And we've tried to convince her to move, but she just won't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
She just won't do it. Yeah. And it's hard to watch that grief on her face because it changed her mentally, physically, you know, as a whole, and just can't imagine. I can't imagine, and I've said it to her. I cannot imagine how you feel. You know, I don't question her. I don't try to force her to do things. But the day that I learned from my youngest daughter, and I called her Money's mom, and I said, I'm sorry to hear about what happened to Money, because we call him Money for short, MONI. And I said, what do you need my help with? And she said, everything. And if I tell you, John, that just broke my heart. She said, I need your help with everything. Woo. And I dropped everything that I was doing and been doing it ever since. And, I had to be the one to search for a funeral home, that would handle his remains. And she just told me, she said, I can't do it. She said, I don't know where to start and don't know what to do. She said, I just need your help. And I've been doing it ever since. And I'm gonna keep doing it. I made a promise to our money. I'm gonna keep doing it. I won't stop. I'm gonna keep going until they are held responsible for what they did. And I mean that. And I mean it with everything that's in me. I mean
Sh-
it.
She is so lucky. She is so lucky to have you. And I think it's very special that you recognize there's things that she just can't do. I mean, can you
Yes.
imagine her trying to do this kind of stuff, do all this press, all this media, clean up the mess of big media on this, and try to just hold herself together?
Mhm.
It's too much. It's too much for one person. It's the first thing I say anytime a family member reaches out to me and we've got a missing loved one. What are we going to do? Or we're facing a murder. What are we going to do? You have to find people to help you, and
Mhm.
you got to start chopping up the pieces and saying, okay, you're taking care of this. They're taking care of that. It takes a team, and
Yes.
You've been doing just such amazing work, but you have also been making your team. You've been finding all these other people that are helping you along the way.
Yes.
Somehow you already got the message loud and clear, and I'm so happy that you're using this approach with it, because you couldn't do it
Yes,
on your own either. And I love
exactly.
how, like, yeah, we're being critical of some of what's going on with law enforcement here, but
Mhm,
you're maintaining that relationship. Because of that, you've got this
mhm,
meeting coming up. You've got that communication line open, and it's just because of that spirit that I mentioned before. You're not writing these people off. You know you need them at some point. You can tell them
mhm,
you're unhappy with them, but you're not going to write them off. And that is, if there's a lesson in today's story for any of you out there that might have to deal with anything like this in your life,
mhm,
that's it. Because at some point, hopefully, there are criminal charges, and you're going to need those investigators to sit on a
mhm,
stand and speak for Armani.
mhm.
That's the trick to this whole thing.
That's true.
Um,
I had
how
attended a meeting back in January the 2nd, 2020. John, I can count on both hands the number of times that DPD has told me there are no further leads to follow up on. But look
Mhm.
where we are today. Had I given up and walked away, that's why I say to everybody, anytime somebody asks me, what advice do you have for families? Never give up. You asked me what drives me earlier. When they say the word no to me, that's like pouring gasoline on a fire, just throwing the match on it. Because it just fuels my drive, even more. January the 2nd, 2020, I was told by a homicide supervisor that DPD has wasted enough time and money on our money. And they usually don't waste this much time on a case that's been ruled as unexplained, because on the Dallas police report that you showed on the screen earlier, it's listed as an unexplained death.
right?
And with the ME's office, it's undetermined.
Yeah,
So, we have undetermined and unexplained. These are the two twins that I despise. And I just want to get that evidence tested to prove that he was murdered. Then we go from there and work on getting this case into the court where it needs to be. But the case evidence has to be tested first. We have to be able to prove this.
right, right. I know you've got a change.org petition. I just wanted to give you a moment to speak to everyone that's watching, and let's ask them, please take a moment, come and take a look at this, get behind it with us. I've already signed it. What
Yeah.
is the goal of this? Oh, and look, Robin Warder, a week ago, our good friend, another friend of the true crime community here. Um,
Yes.
what is this? What does this mean? What are we signing here at change.org?
What this means, John, is that I want to first say thank you to Jolyn Rice. I drafted the rough draft because I wanted to find a way to honor our money on his 34th birthday, his 34th heavenly birthday. Um, in celebration of his 34th birthday, I reached out to Jolyn Rice. Jolyn Rice has been a supporter of mine as well. Jolyn Rice, Don Kate, and Haley Gray, and now you and Nicole Smith. Like you say, I'm just gathering this family as I go along.
Yep.
And so Jolyn Rice, I reached out to her. I said, can you help me with creating and uploading the change.org petition for our money? She said, sure, Robin. She said, absolutely, I'll help you do that. So she took what I had written and she put it in this professional format that you see, that's
Mm-hmm.
outlining everybody that's involved in his case, who can be reached out, involved in his case. And what my goal is with this change.org petition, John, I want to gather these electronic signatures in order to take it to a judge to be able to impanel a grand jury to get the proper help, or to have law enforcement to actively pursue and investigate Armani's case, if they should, without them being forced into it.
Yep.
That's my goal with this petition, to garner these signatures, to be able to take it to a judge and to ask him to impanel this grand jury for me, where the grand jury can force law enforcement to do their job. And I shouldn't have to take this route, but this is the route that I'm forced to take.
Absolutely.
So that's
Absolutely.
what this change.org petition means to me.
Yep. So please take a moment and join us in signing that and read through it. It's so well structured. It's very straightforward about what it's asking for. You've been hearing a lot of
Mhm.
the same message here today as we've been speaking. In
Yes.
the description box down below, I will also have the link tree for Justice for Armani, so you can get to all the links, all the media, the good information that Robin is backing. Hopefully, there'll be a new video that you want to add there soon. And also the Web Sleuths thread, like I mentioned earlier today. I also wanted to give a shout out to Method and Madness podcast. I was really impressed by the coverage over there as well. Before we close it out here today, I just want to ask you, Robin, how do you stay connected to Armani's memory? How do you stay connected to his spirit, the things, the light that he brought into your family? How do you keep that lit?
I keep it lit because I listen. One thing about what I believe, John, is his spirit speaks to me. And I helped to raise Armani. He grew up around and with my children. So he's a part of me as well. His mother and I share the same blood. When you asked me earlier, are we blood related? Yes, we are. And his spirit, it speaks to me because days and nights sometimes when I feel like okay, I've exhausted all avenues, and where do I go next? I get quiet and I listen. In he speaks to me, and so by the time I blink twice, okay, well I can, I think about this and go down this route, and then eventually once I start down that route, yes, I've taken the right turn to be able to go in this direction because I gain another person that's willing to help me get and do what it is that Almighty Spirit is guiding me to do you know. And I want justice for him. I want that, and that's something that I'm not going to rest until I get it.
Robin, I wanted to remind you and your daughter, because I know it's her birthday too on December 19th. But
Yes.
I just wanted to remind you guys to be sure to do a little dance for Armani on December
Oh
19th.
yeah.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
All right.
I think about him all the time when, riding and hear music because that was his happy spot. That like they said, a sweet spot, for him. Music, food, and dancing was him. And he would have been something big in the fashion world too, John, had he been able to realize his dream. Because he just loved fashion, hair, clothes, and he had become a pretty good cook, too.
Yeah.
And he had to, because he was a latchkey kid.
Hmm.
He had to learn how to cook if he wanted to eat,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So that's what I
Anything you
loved
want
about
to
it most.
anything you want to say before we end here?
That's what I loved most about Armani. He was a free spirit. He didn't allow anybody to put him into a box. He didn't allow you to just consider him as this one you see him one way. He just didn't allow you to box him in like that. And he was a free spirit and didn't allow, anybody to control him. And that's what the problem was with a lot of people. Just allow him to be himself, and you will get the best of him that way. Just allow him to be him.
Absolutely.
And that was the best part, being himself.
Robin, thank you so much for sharing Armani with us. Thank you for this time. And I can't wait to see you in person. I get to Dallas every now and then, so I might have to try to line up a trip because I feel like I got to give you a really big hug after getting to know you
And I
here.
would I would love that. I would love to see you in person. And please reach out,
Yeah,
when you're out this way. I would love
absolutely.
that.
You got it. Best of luck, and you keep me updated. I'm part of the team now.
All right. And thank you so much, John, for this opportunity. This is an opportunity that I don't take for granted because anybody that gets the opportunity to see this case, like I said in the news interview, we just need that one witness. We just need that one witness to see these interviews and to come forward. And that would be the one big break in Armani's case that we need.
If you have any friends in the Dallas area, please share this video with them. We can see major media had a little run of information with this case. They've stopped, quite honestly. Interviews like this are now the best way to get information about this case out, but we need your help to do that. So please share this video. If you don't know anyone in Dallas, you can also help just by hitting the up vote, hit the down vote, leave a comment. All of that engagement tells YouTube to show this video to more people, and we got to get this case in front of more eyes. We got to get more people talking about Armani. And thank you so much for sticking through this episode. It might be a little bit longer than usual, but I just wanted to give Robin every opportunity to explain every aspect of this case. And outside of all that, share with us how special her nephew was. And I feel pretty good that we hit that mark. Of course, you might have noticed we don't run commercials in the middle of these presentations. We can only do that because of our amazing supporters. A big thank you to PayPal supporter Brandy Fry. If you'd like to join our supporters, please visit lordenarts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even just buy us a coffee like Candy Bishop does every month. We really appreciate you guys as we try to help these families in these very tough situations. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. And please join us again next week for a brand new episode of Searchlight right here on the Lorden Arts channel.